So it's all very well looking at lights in isolation in a studio, but of course the real challenge is when you come into real locations. This one here was a very popular question we had from you when we had that short survey about lighting challenges, and it's mixed lighting, particularly in office environments. And office environments like this give us a number of real-world challenges. First of all, it's mixed lighting. Of 95% of the offices I've ever worked in, fluorescent overhead is the #1 challenge. The #2 challenge is, do you have windows? Do you have a situation where you've got daylight coming in and you've got fluorescence coming in and light bouncing around the room, giving you this horrible mixed light? And you can see on this shot here, I'm balanced to tungsten on the camera and everything's looking very blue. So even though we've got fluorescent overhead lights, and we've actually lit me with a Diva light just so you can see me, but even still, the predominant light source in this room is daylight. So what are the different scenarios you're going to come across? Well, do you light with daylight light? Do you light with tungsten light? What if you can't turn off the overhead lights? What do you do? And I'm going to look at some of the lights we've already looked at and show you the different effects they'll give you, because what you'll discover in this scenario is that some lights will simply not work. So let's start by looking at the very first light, which is the dado light. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to assume in this room we can turn off the overhead lights. So I'm going to do that now. The next thing you want to do, if at all possible, is control your environment. In this situation, where we have actually got some blinds on the windows, no matter how tricky they are, if you can control your environment, you're ending up creating a pseudo studio, and then you can start to light from scratch by closing everything up. This way, you're starting in an environment where you've got some control. Now we're seeing a little bit of light on Matt because of the light that's lighting me. But let's start by just switching on my 150 softbox, because ideally I want to light with tungsten light. With the egg crate off, what we're seeing is a lot of light spilling around the white or the grey of the back wall. And what I want to see is Matt's face being lit with that vignetting off. So by using the egg crate, I'm moving this light in, because by putting the egg crate on, I'm going to lose some intensity, is move that into the frame. Now, what I'm going to do here, and just notice that, Fred, actually I can swing that light around. You can actually see there's a sweet spot in the light where it actually gets brighter in the middle of the frame and gets a little darker if I pan it off. You'll be able to feel that on your eyes, Matt. So what I want to do is get the brightest part of the light into Matt's face, and I want to really see both of his eyes being lit. Now this is quite a moody looking frame, but I've got a major problem. I'm now seeing my light in the shot. So the simplest solution is to move the camera closer in. So I've just adjusted the frame, and I think if I just move this slightly this way, I'll just turn that light around. I'm at an aperture of f8. I think I can afford to open up a little bit so we get a good reading on Matt's face. One of the things you'll discover as you begin to light, and why I always just start with one light, is you start to see the frame evolve. And what we've got here is a good frame with Matt and a good exposure on Matt's face. But something I've noticed is we're set to tungsten balance on the camera. We've got a tungsten light source on his face. But you see this blue coming in here. That's coming in from the daylight that's seeping through the windows. And one of the challenges with this frame is that Matt's wearing a dark shirt and he's got dark hair and he's against a dark background. So we don't actually see a separation from him and the background. So we lack any definition, we lack any depth in the shot. So what we can do is we could bring in a second light up here maybe, and bring that high up and separate him down here. But there's a much simpler solution. And this is where working in an environment where you have this kind of control can be very useful. What I can actually do is simply this. Use these blinds as a light source. Think of these as a light source. And what you can do is twist this round so we actually see the light reflecting from the daylight and giving us this blue texture on the blind. And that's giving us some color contrast. And actually, wow, what a difference that makes. Now, I've spotted two problems with this scene. The first one is I'm actually seeing the reflection of this light here in this window. Now, that's going to be a common problem, and that's caused because the angle of incidence from the lens axis to the angle of reflection of the surface of the light is equal. Angle of incidence equals angle of reflection, so it doesn't matter what we do here. If we remain in this position, we're not going to get rid of that reflection. What we can do is move this off axis. So if we move this round here, we should lose the reflection, and we do, but we've changed the characteristic of the light, but not in a way which I think is not pleasing. So what I could do is push this light in to increase the intensity on Matt's face. Now, I don't mind how that looks, because when you're lighting guys, you can afford to be a little more dramatic, and the more you push the light round, the more dramatic it will be. We'll create the shadow on this side of his face. So what we've got here is a nice exposure down here, but quite a lot of shadow here. It might be that that works for this look, but it might be just a little bit too dramatic for a corporate video. So what we could do is bring in a second dado light and attach that to here, plug this in. I'm really trying to highlight that, you want to start with as simple a lighting solution as you possibly can, and then if you need to get more complex, then you can do. Move that right into the corner. Put this stand up as high as I can. Okay, switch this on. All I want to do is basically light the side of Matt's face. I don't want the light to spill onto the background like so. Try and keep it off the desk so I can really position what it does quite easily because of the control the dado light gives me. And that's almost there. It's a little bit harsh, so I can just reduce the intensity a little. Open up. The problem is stick it in front of this frame because this is in the way and it's not in vision, so I can just move it out of the way. Put the light here. Now, we're obviously not working in a real office. It's actually a lighting demo room, so you wouldn't necessarily have some of these cables draped around. I'm just flooding that light out. And what I'm doing is I'm looking to just create, I'll switch it on and off to show you. It's dark around this side of the face, so I want to just add that little bit of light, and that could be motivated from a light that you can't see off camera. It could be a practical light in the corner room. You can cheat quite a lot with this kind of filmmaking. So what we've got here now, I think, is quite a dramatic looking interview, but one that I feel is quite cinematic. And the only other thing I might try and do is open that other blind, but I can just spot that the handle's broken off it. And you'll find this in real locations. Some things will just not work. So I'm going to let that go. I quite like the fact that we've got a bit of blue light on this car. I'm just going to fix the bottom of this blind where there seems to be, there we go, a little bit of light leak, and just tidy up that frame. And that, I think, as a simple solution very quickly in this environment, works quite well. Now let's just assume for a second that you have no control with the blinds in a room like this. What is it going to look like with this existing setup? I don't actually mind it, but there's one thing that's blaringly obvious, and that is the color temperature. With such a lot of daylight in the frame now, it could be argued that it's overpowering, and we've got this actually a classic mixed light situation where we've got a lot of daylight dominating the frame and tungsten lighting, which just doesn't look quite right. So we have to think about changing the color temperature of the lighting in the scene for this to work. So the first thing I would have to do would be to turn my color balance of my camera to daylight. Let's see if we can do that now. So we go to white balance, 3, 2, to 5-6. So the exterior part of the scene now looks the correct color. But for me, and I think you'd agree, that the tungsten light on the scene is just too orange on Matt's face. So the only thing we can do here is change out the tungsten light for daylight. I'm going to use the celeb light and turn that into daylight, and there we can balance the lighting in this frame from tungsten to daylight. So let's switch on the celeb. We've balanced it to daylight, and this is the advantage of this light. We can dial that in. Now what we've done is affected our key light source by making sure that that is hitting Matt, and we can now see we've balanced the lighting outside to match the camera's color temperature. We've balanced the light from the celeb to match the color temperature. Now the only light that doesn't look right is this back kicker, because that's still tungsten. So the final thing we're going to do to just adjust this scene for daylight is take some color temperature gel. Now this is half CTB, half color temperature blue. So that's going to convert this tungsten light source to a mixed source. It's not going to convert completely to 5600 Kelvin. It's going to take it to about 4300 Kelvin. The reason I'm doing that is I still want to bring a little bit of warmth into this side of his face. So what this is now giving me is a much more balanced scene where the daylight coming in through the window is nice and natural. I've got a daylight source on his face. Now in this environment here in the UK in January, we're very lucky. Outdoors is basically overcast and grey, but I'm still actually blowing my highlights in the exterior part of the scene. And in some cases that would be perfectly acceptable, but in other circumstances it wouldn't be.